Hey, what's going on, traders? I hope you guys are having a good day today. This is Chris at Verillo Trading. In today's video, we're going to take a look at the crude oil markets, the crude oil market and the crude oil sentiment. So let us get to it, guys. What do you guys think of the crude oil markets here? That's what this video is going to be talking about here. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on crude oil and where I think it is. And also, I want to debunk a couple of things I've been seeing around on the internet. And it's kind of funny when you think of it, from the perspective of a trader who, I didn't exactly start trading yesterday. So I've seen a few things and I kind of have a decent understanding of how things work here. I have a very good understanding of how things work. So that doesn't mean I'm going to be able to execute a great trade on crude oil, but I want to show you guys what I think of crude oil right now, okay? So if you guys enjoy this content, let us know in the comments below. You can also click on the links in the description to support the channel, okay? The first link, just click on it. It helps the channel quite a bit, so thank you very much. Okay, so this all started around 2 days ago, Wednesday, June 8th, when I noticed that crude oil was up 2.5%, maybe even 3%, trading up to these around these 123s. And at the same time, I was seeing a lot of bullish articles from specific news sources that are, I guess you could say they're considered retail or general public news sources, okay? On top of that, everybody seems to be talking about oil these days, about how gas prices are so high. So it is just something that is just so commonly understood right now. And all of it is lining up together, to create this sentiment, okay? And this is like me sort of reading into the puzzle instead of just, blindly saying this is what it is, okay? After I saw that, basically I saw CBC News, which is a news company in Canada. They posted something like crude oil is going higher, and I just started to do some general searching of the internet for crude oil. So you can just do a basic search, crude oil, and you'll start to get news articles. Okay, this is one way you can figure out, the news sentiment for a particular market. Now, because crude oil is a global commodity, it's different than the stock market itself. I feel like it's actually harder to gauge the sentiment on the stock market, whereas crude oil, it might be a little bit different. The second thing I did was perform a YouTube search for crude oil and do a filter and make sure that it's only set to either this week or today. And all of a sudden, I started to find some YouTube channels that are posting updates about crude oil prices. And what really, really sparked my interest is that I came across certain channels that really, in my opinion, have no idea what they're talking about. It's hilarious. Some of these people are just drawing lines on the chart and they're saying this market doesn't want to pull back and it's looking very bullish. This is one of them here anyways. So let's get back to the chart. Okay, today crude oil is trading around a 120 and 56. We had a decent pullback down to these 118s and a halves here, and it recovered ever since then. Ever since this Wednesday, this is kind of, like I said, that's what kind of caught my eye, and we're kind of approaching the highs of March 2022 here, where it did gap up to 130 and then it sold off pretty aggressively. So there's a lot of people out there now talking about how crude oil is going to go to 128, 130, and that this is the resistance, and that if this breaks, then it's going to go higher. And I've even heard some people say if it breaks the all-time high, that means it's going to go even higher. And all of that, I think, this is my opinion, that is 100% BS. There is nothing that will indicate to any of us that if it breaks this price, which is the all-time high, 147 and something, that it's going to continue going higher to 150, 160, and 180 and 200. There is literally nothing indicating that, okay? There is nothing even indicating that this is resistance. This is not resistance. This is just the highest price that it traded at. The same for this 130. There is nothing about this 130 that means that it's resistance, 130 and 50, okay? And this is where these newbie technical analysis traders really just seem to have no understanding of how markets operate clearly. But, we'll let them, do what they have to do, and that's the end of the story, okay? Where am I going with this? That's the big question here, okay? So basically, here's the weekly time frame for crude oil. Okay, let's go over to a one-day chart and then we'll kind of zoom in a little bit more. And we can see this is where we are currently. So it appears that in the short term, we have seen some supply come into the market. How do I know that? Well, we have this pattern of many days in a row where the buyers were in control, and now we first time see the market testing and potentially even closing below the low of the previous bar. That does not mean the market has now turned bearish, but what it does mean is that there has been some supply that entered the market, okay? And what that means is that the sellers have now become active. So there are traders that are telling you the market is bullish, but at the same time, there are sellers that have become active in the market at the same time that everybody is bullish. So that's where things start to get interesting and people have to paint their own picture. Let's go over to our shorter term chart now on the other screen. Okay, so here we have some price action, 15-minute time frame here of the general price action we've been seeing. So ever since June 8th, which was Wednesday, the day that everybody seemed to be bullish on crude oil, everybody and their grandma, this is the day where it started to really stop going up. And you can see here that the market started to become supplied, and it did sort of meet up with this area, 122 and 47 cents, which was a general supply zone from March 9th. Okay. And I can also show you a screenshot of this price action from the early March, where there's certain levels to keep an eye on here in regards to the price action. So this level comes from right here. This is a supply zone that comes from right here, which would have been March 9th in the overnight session. Okay, and you can also see it's a bit of a high node here. So when we traded through these 123s, we traded through this high node here. We didn't quite make it to 124 though. We traded through here, resisted through 123s. Okay, and that's where we are now. We're back in this range right here. Now, if you look at the structure of this profile, we have a lot of volume that is traded up here in these 124s, these 126s, and all the way up to these 128s. I'm going to make an assumption. I'm going to say that unless crude oil can get back above 124s and really potentially hold this node on a back test, I don't really think it has any business going here in the short term. Now, like I said, if we gap up next week and we start trading above these 124s and holding it and then wanting to rally up, I think it can easily go back and test these 26s, maybe even 28s and higher. But the current price action combined with the retail sentiment that I've been able to determine, it really doesn't seem likely. In fact, it seems more likely that we continue to see some longer term trading range action and potentially some continued downside in the crude oil market. So that's kind of where I'm biased to, which is, I guess, sort of contrarian to what everybody else is thinking right now. And of course, maybe I'm overlooking some macroeconomic aspects, but at the same time, I've been trading for a decent amount of time and I understand, the psychology of the general public. And one thing that has always stayed true is that when everybody starts talking about something, the opposite tends to happen. Okay, this was our resistance ever since Wednesday, and you can see they were kind of, we started to see consolidation, and all of a sudden all these rallies just kept getting sold, and we start to see what we call poor highs, where we see a resistance that just doesn't break. And you can see that it constantly resisted that area. So for me, that's a poor high resistance. And it's really a dangerous spot because in the case that it does trade there again, there's a good chance that it reclaims it or flushes through it. But then what happens afterwards will be significant. So as you can see here in the overnight session today or this morning, June 10th, there was a significant rally that started in the overnight trading session. Just for testing purposes, I actually initiated a few long scalps in crude oil. I think it was somewhere around here. I was trying to scalp it to the long side right around 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. Eastern time, and I was having a hard time. It was trading really badly in Globex session. So that was really just for testing purposes. But really my idea here is to potentially take a longer term idea on this crude oil. Okay. So now, what is really interesting about the way this is traded in the overnight is how we saw a significant rally. And I knew at this point, after seeing how it was behaving, after I got, stopped out of those two longs and it just continued to chop higher, I knew that it was in a short-term uptrend at that point, and that for the scope of at least the overnight session, I think it would be possible that we saw a rally. And of course, I was sleeping, so I didn't act on that. So we did in fact see that rally. So that means that my read was correct. So what I'm trying to piece together here is that, I have an idea about the market and I'm trying to build trust in my reads. So the first read was Wednesday, which was, I said, you know what, everyone's bullish on crude. Everybody's posting bullish on crude. I'm going to start keeping an eye on this. And what I'm thinking in the back of my head is I'm thinking to take a longer term short position. So far, this idea would have been correct, in fact. So that's one read that was good. Now, going to yesterday evening when I started to scalp it to the long side, I want to argue and say that, partially the reason why I was trying to scalp it to the long side was to see if I could read it in the short term as well. And it just seemed that it wasn't just very reliable at all. So I just said, what the hell with that? I took 2 10-tick losses on the micros and that was it, So went along with that. This morning I get up and I see that it had top ticked this 122.5 area and then, flushed through it and then reclaimed it into a big sell-off. And really, that is really something that sparks my interest, because we reclaim these poor highs temporarily only to end up in a big sell-off and re-enter the bigger trading range. So the sellers are very active in this market currently, I think, and basically I'm looking for a bigger picture short idea. And what's tricky about this is I don't really quite know where I will position necessarily with this right now. So we have these 122 and a halves, which are still poor highs in my opinion. It could be moved a little lower, but at the end of the day, this is still resistance. And the issue with shorting here is that there's a high node here. We traded through it. There's a high node here, session high node, and there's a bigger picture high node here. And then if we do see a continued rally, there is a good chance that it goes all the way through here. And if it does go all the way through here, it's probably going to go all the way through here and end up at 125, maybe even by next week. Now, what happens when it gets there is a different story. Okay, so what's really tricky about this is trying to gauge where I gotta short it. So, do we short it here and then see how it plays out? Or do we wait till next week and think of positioning it next week? But then, of course, if it gaps down next week and we start trading, below the lows of yesterday's week, like basically down to these 117s, 118s, and maybe even lower, then, of course, I will be frustrated that I missed the trade. So what I think I need to do is either short it immediately or wait around and short it next week. So what do you guys think I should do? Honestly, there was only one YouTube channel that actually posted something that was pretty interesting about crude oil. I won't tell you which channel that was, but the rest of them are all super perma bullish on it right now. And I'll be honest with you guys, I was macro bullish on crude oil for a long time. Ever since it was at around $60 and lower, people would always ask me during live streams, what do you think of crude oil? And I always told them macro bullish. No one's talking about it. It's macro bullish. Until now, of course, everyone's talking about it. So now I'm macro bearish, more or less. Okay. It's just an idea. And one other thing I want to end this video off with is that, of course, the best trading idea, this is something that I've learned in my time of trading that I believe to be true, is that often the best trades often feel counterintuitive. It literally feels like you're going against something inside of you. And they feel a little awkward to take these types of trades because in a way you're going against an idea, a bigger idea. So it feels very counterintuitive, but those are the trades that end up working, it seems. So if I would have just trusted my bias ever since Wednesday, I would have probably been in the money on this right away, or until now at least. So that's it, and we'll have to see what happens. I'm thinking about a longer term short trade on crude oil. See you guys later. Bye.